From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Sunday afternoon and Happy New Year. Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. The holiday season is winding down, and the last few months certainly made up the traditional season of giving. During this time, we tend to give to others, including the less fortunate in our community. It's a time of year we also come up with ways to better ourselves by setting New Year's resolutions, and that's where 22 News in Focus comes in today. Today we'll find out how local nonprofit organizations that you've given to this holiday season are doing, how they've used your donations, and what their plans are for the new year. Then later in the program, we'll talk about bettering ourselves, New Year's resolutions. We'll talk to experts about setting realistic goals and coming up with a way to achieve them. Joining us first today, we have Andrew Morehouse from the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you on. I know that there's been a few different food drives and a few events to help out the food bank. Why don't you first off just talk about how did this holiday season go for you? Were people as giving as they are in years past?
It appears that we're on par with last year, and it's really important this time of year because it's naturally our highest volume of support during this year, individual giving from businesses and individuals, and so by the middle to end of January we'll know how we fared. But it's such a critical time of year for us. We actually raise about 70% of our annual budget in the first 3 months of the year.
And one thing I know that we'll hear from the nonprofits throughout this program are that it is, of course, important to give all year round, and that in and of itself would make a nice resolution to help others throughout the entire year. Yeah. You said that this makes up a good portion of your budget. So how did you do this winter, and how long do you think that will actually hold you? Did you get enough donations to last you through the summer and through next fall and all of that?
Yes, absolutely. And so again, we're hoping that we'll raise upwards to 70% of our budget because as it turns out, giving does tend to drop during the summer months. And so we really need to be planning well ahead. And we were very fortunate that we had a successful series of fundraising events this year, starting with our We'll Bike for Food campaign in the end of September. Valley Gives, which just ended, was a great opportunity for us to get our message out and to receive donations. And of course now we have a Check Out Hunger program where individuals can make a donation at many retailers around the area, retail food chains that is, to support our mission, which is to feed our family, feed our friends and neighbors in need, and lead the community to end hunger.
So tell me how this works. When people donate either a bag of food or give you monetary donations, how do you then spend that money, or how is that food then distributed? Does it all stay local? Talk to us about how our donations are used.
Sure. Well, the food bank is essentially the clearinghouse for the distribution of emergency food to a network of pantries and meal sites and shelters, 250 strong across all 4 counties. So our operating budget really covers our operating costs. We own a 30,000 square foot warehouse in Hatfield, Massachusetts. We have 3 refrigerated trucks that are on the road every working day. We have about 45 staff, most of them full-time. So most of the funds that we receive support the cost associated with getting food out the door, food to 250 local feeding programs, and ultimately to more than 200,000 people in the last 12 months. And that's a staggering number when you think about it, and we're not seeing it diminish.
Yeah, now 200,000 families, is that just here in Western Massachusetts, or where are these people located?
Yeah, 200,000 individuals.
Individuals.
In all 4 counties of Western Massachusetts. So the 3 counties of the Pioneer Valley, Hamden, Hampshire, Franklin, and also Berkshire counties. So we cover a vast area, and we can only do it in partnership with our local partners, local feeding programs and that provide services often in addition to providing emergency food, but mainly, in most cases, they're distributing food.
How does that number compare to past years? Is this a problem that's getting worse or getting better? What do you
It is. Hunger, unfortunately, is a symptom of much larger problems that we're facing as a society and in our economy. Being able to support families, and so in the same way we want a business-friendly climate, I would like to think that we in our society want a family-friendly climate, and families are really, really struggling to get by, and it's no surprise when, the average minimum wage person is earning $5,600 less than that same individual did in 1968. So, income is certainly a big part of it. And so, what we do is to make more food available. And we actually distributed 1 million more pounds of food in the last 12 months than we did in the previous 12 months. And we anticipate distributing even more this year, and mainly to Hampden County, where we see that the need is so great because it's the largest center of population of the 4 counties, and there are a large number of folks who either live in poverty or are earning a minimum wage, and they still can't get by. So the ranks of the working poor and even middle class families that are trying to get out from under the Great Recession after having lost so much, perhaps in income, perhaps in employment, and perhaps even in assets. They may have lost their home. So, we see all kinds of folks who are really struggling to keep their families afloat.
So while we hear about, jobs being added and the economy turning around, you're still seeing a lot of new families. Are these new families coming in, or are these families who have been in this situation for years?
We're seeing new families all the time, and certainly our partners in the local communities would confirm that they're seeing new families all the time. We're seeing children. I'm hearing stories of teachers talking about having to, give food to the kids in the classroom, particularly on Mondays because there was no food in the home, or a senior who's making the difficult choice between paying for a prescription drug and putting enough food on the table, or, a family, the anguish of a family is doing all the right things, playing by all the rules, working hard, but not making enough money to support their families and having to go to a pantry or meal site to get an extra meal or a bag of groceries because they just can't get by.
Well, that's so sad. Now, do you get all of your supplies through donations, or how does the government help? If at all, how does that work?
Yeah, in terms of our cash operating budget, only 10% of our funding comes from government, from the state and federal government. Over 60% of our cash donations come from individuals and businesses. It's amazing.
Wow.
We rely so much on the community. We really are an institution of the community, for the community, by the community. However, in terms of the food that we receive, again, about half of it comes from the food industry, and of that, about 1.75 million pounds of food that we distributed, of the 9 million last year, came in the form of local produce. About a half a dozen farms, including our own farm, and then we do use state funding to buy local produce from local farmers. So that amounted to close to 2 million pounds of, all told, 2 million pounds of produce, and about half of that came right here from the Pioneer Valley. The other half of the food that we receive does come from either the federal or the state government. So some of the funding that we get does pay for food, and those provide the core staples that so many families rely on in the pantries and meal sites that distribute the food to them. And they are the healthy, nutritious food items, dairy products, dry goods like pastas and rice, and canned goods that are shelf stable like soups and other beans, things that are high in nutritional value, protein and whatnot that families can rely on.
Okay, I want to talk about what people can do right now if they want to help you out in this new year. So you said you were talking about the Checkout Hunger program as well. Is that only financial, only monetary, or are you collecting donations as well? And what do you need?
Sure. Well, there are lots of different ways that people can support us. If you go to a Big Y store, you can buy a $10 box of food that will be presented to the food bank, and then we'll distribute that through the network to local pantries and feeding programs. Stop and Shop has its own fundraising program at the checkout that will support food banks, and then in many food retailers, smaller food retailers across the region, including Price Chopper being the largest, you can similarly buy a $1, $3, or $5 coupon, and those funds will come to the food bank. And every dollar that's donated to the food bank enables us to provide 3 meals or $9 worth of food. So it's an incredible return on a very small investment that, when you put all those dollars together, really amounts to a lot of support to help us keep our doors open, our trucks on the road, and helping people put food on their tables so they can spend another day and get the support of so many other nonprofits to plug the holes that families are facing to try to stay afloat.
Yeah, well, it is a very sad situation, but I'm happy to hear that there are ongoing events, and I hope people do continue to give to you in the new year and help out all these families.
Well, we're very blessed to have such a supportive community, so we're grateful for that.
Very good. Andrew Morehouse from the Food Bank of Western Mass, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I do appreciate it, and good luck to you in the new year as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And still ahead, we'll talk about setting New Year's resolutions and figuring out how to keep them. But first, after the break, we'll talk about helping the homeless. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking with local organizations that help people in our communities. In the last segment, we talked about feeding the families who need help and programs that help supply food to them. Now let's talk about those who have no place to call home. It is an especially sad situation when the temperature drops in the wintertime. Joining us now to talk about how the homeless community is doing, we have Bill Miller, Executive Director of Friends of the Homeless in Springfield. Thank you so much for being here, Bill. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
Homelessness is a topic we seem to talk about in Western Mass year-round. We have families living in hotels. We have some people living in the streets. We have some people who have sought shelter. From your experience, how are we doing? How is the homeless situation doing, at least in our state?
Well, in our state, so that's a pretty broad question.
How about Western Mass? Let's focus on Springfield.
Because there's, first of all, there's two real distinct segments. So there's the families in hotels, as you mentioned, and family shelters, and then there's shelters and programs for individuals. And the reason there's a difference is that families in this state, and there's only 2 states in the country that that do this, but there's a right to shelter for families. It sounds a bit odd, but there's not necessarily a right to shelter for individuals. So there are independent programs like ours and others that have grown over the years to serve individuals. We don't think anybody should necessarily be living on the streets. But the state automatically pays for shelter for families who qualify, and so when they run out of shelter space, which they have for the last few years, they have these motel situations. We're not directly involved in that. We see it. It's challenging. The Baker administration is going to take that on. They're prioritizing it, and they should. I mean, we don't want families, we don't want children living in those situations. No.
So what do your numbers look like? I mean, do you have chronic homeless in your facility, or do you have new faces? Are people getting back on their feet? What are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Well, once again, we could break that down into 2 segments, and the strategy over the last few years. I don't know how many listeners have heard the notion of ending homelessness, but in our industry, so to speak, we talk about that, and it seems like a really ambitious goal. The fact is, that goal is really to sort of reduce the visible homeless, or the people who are literally living on the streets, and so I think Western Mass has improved in that area a great deal. Springfield in particular has brought the numbers of people who are living outdoors way down. We do have people now who are volunteers who are sort of looking on the streets and making sure that people won't be out in the severe cold, and that's critical. But we've expanded our facility a number of years ago, and I think we're meeting not just the immediate shelter need, but our real goal is to help people move out of shelter and out into their own housing, and so we're pretty successful at that as well.
Yeah, so people are able to get back on their feet once they're there. You said that it is really more of a resource center, as you've mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, and the key to that is that people who are looking for housing or looking for jobs or needing other kinds of help need that to find that during business hours, so during the day. And so we have a facility where we're open during the day, and people can get their meals and their immediate needs met, but they can also meet with our caseworkers and have access to computers and phones to make the calls, to do the outreach that they need to do to get themselves situated. And so between 1,000 and 1,200 people come through our services just in downtown Springfield every year, and it's significant. It's a busy place. Our staff does a great job. I got to give them a little shout out here. They really work hard and around the clock, and every day. I know it's the holiday time now, but we're open. We were open on Christmas Day. We were open on New Year's Day, but we'll be open every day the rest of the year as well. And so the community support that we get is terrific. We love our corporate friends, but our individual donors, and it's extremely meaningful to us. We're small enough, and we're local, we're independent. When a grandmother sends over $5, that donation means as much to us as our corporate supporters as well. We love our corporate supporters. Please don't get me wrong, but it's just it's a vote sort of for people who are for the work that we do, and so really that's meaningful. Even though there's a practical side to it too, which also is meaningful.
Well, homelessness certainly tugs on the heartstrings. It's an issue. Nobody wants to see anybody homeless. I'm glad that you mentioned your donors, because many people want to donate to homelessness, but it can be hard to figure out exactly how to do that appropriately and how you impact the most people. I guess, how does that $5 from Grandma, how is that money, how do you allocate your funds that come in? And also, is it the same as donating to someone who's, say, standing outside your car holding a sign as well? You have panhandlers. How do you donate to homelessness, and how is that money then allocated?
Right. Well, you and I have talked about panhandlers in the past, and honestly, the folks who are out there, for the most part, have some type of housing typically, and they're supplementing their income for whatever reasons. And so I think it's an individual choice about whether you give to a panhandler or not. I know there's a lot of issues around that, but that's really the people who are staying with us typically aren't doing that. They're looking for ways to better themselves. And so I think the difference between giving to somebody standing on the street versus giving to a local organization is, we're putting the money to work to kind of help encourage people to move up and move out and be self-sufficient. I mean, we're certainly don't want to see anybody who's moving out of our place end up on a street corner. We want them to have jobs, housing, and be productive members of our society. I mean, we need them, frankly. It's 1,000 adults who we need in the workforce, and who are, parents oftentimes, aunts, uncles, their grandmothers and grandfathers themselves. So, they're important members of their families.
And as we get into these colder months, what do you expect how many people do you expect to have? Do you have enough beds? You must get on these frigid nights, people who are coming in there just to get out of the cold. Is it difficult to supply beds to all these people who come in?
Well, honestly, on any given night that it's cold, we don't see an influx, because there's not a huge amount of people in our greater Springfield that are living outdoors. Now, I'm hearing bits and pieces of other communities that don't have a program like ours, that may be having, sort of tent cities develop and that kind of thing along riverbanks or in, vacant lots. And that will happen if services aren't available. But in the winter, what we know is that if anybody's out there, that's one too many people. So we, in addition to the resource center that's open during the day, it's given us flexible space. So there's been nights where we've had to use the dining room for overflow. I mean, if you go back a couple years, you remember the gas explosion that occurred, and you know, we had a huge influx for a number of months,
Right.
and you know, we were able to manage that in collaboration with, you know, other community members. But we very intentionally, and when we set out to build the resource center, we didn't build a bigger shelter. What we want, again, is to kind of help people move up and move out. So it's packed. We do have people sleeping on the floor at times, and I think that's better than being outside. But we very quickly want them to develop a plan and, you know, let us help them sort of get back into whatever their life is. And again, it's a very diverse group of people, so it's not the same, it's not a cookie cutter that works for everybody. We have a lady who started volunteering in our kitchen. She was in her 50s, she's worked all her life. She had, you know, a downturn, lost her job for whatever reason, and it, you know, it happens, it can happen at any age, and she made just above minimum wage anyway. And you know, she had to sort of get her confidence back as well as as well as find work. And so she started, while she's staying with us, working in the kitchen, and we need people to do that because frankly we serve a lot of meals.
Yeah.
But she then took that and went into there's a training program that's opened up in Holyoke for people working in food service.
Oh, wow.
Specifically for homeless people. And she, I believe she just got a job as of, no, I'm sorry. I have somebody else who worked their way up who just got a job at one of the hotels in their banquet services.
Oh, wow.
She just got accepted to the food service program. So she's on her way, and we have
Wow.
other people who we've helped through that program and through, again, just, you know, we're serving 500 meals a day. So it's like working in a large restaurant or at a banquet facility, and so it's job training in itself.
Wow, that is so nice to hear. You
Yeah.
know, it's not just people who are getting out of the cold and have a roof over their head, but that there is some real training happening in there. Wow, you have a lot going on at the shelter. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I do hope that you continue to see these donations throughout the year and continue this positive progress in the community.
Great.
Thank you so much. Bill Miller, it's so nice to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And next we'll be talking with the Salvation Army about the Red Kettle campaign, and then later, New Year's resolutions. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about how your generous contributions to local nonprofits helped people in your community last year and coming up in the new year. We've talked with two organizations that focus on hunger and homelessness. In just a little bit, we'll switch gears and go from talking about helping others to then helping yourself. We'll talk about how you can set goals that work for you and can be achieved in this new year. But first, many of you threw money in the red kettles outside supermarkets this holiday season. Let's find out how the campaign did and how that money will be spent. Joining me now to talk about that we have, as well as other social services happening at the Salvation Army, we have Captain John Ferrero with us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So talk to me about the Red Kettle campaign. This goes on, everyone knows the sound of the bells. You know it's the holiday season when you hear them. So
And they're
touch me-
usually glad when they stop.
No, it's nice to see them out there and hear the sounds. So tell
Well,
me
it's
how
nice
the
of you to say
campaign
that.
did.
The campaign in Springfield was a little behind last year.
Okay.
We had some challenges. A lot of the people that help us with the bell ringing were ill. There was a lot of flu going around, and
Right.
so that was part of the problem. I don't think it was a lack of willingness for people to donate. We just had a bit of a difficult struggle getting people to ring
Okay.
and keeping them on the kettles.
Yeah.
And, so that was our challenge this year. But we didn't do so poorly that it's going to affect us that much.
That's
We did pretty well.
Did pretty well. So how much do you normally bring in, and how does this sort of work into your annual budget?
Well, in the case of Springfield, it's not a huge part of the budget, but it's a very important part of the budget because by definition our kettle campaign is an unrestricted donation. People put in cash, and it allows us to use it where we need to fill in the budget. And when you have grants, most people who run nonprofits know that grants are very restrictive, and very rarely do they pay for the whole program cost. And so that's what makes the kettle campaign, the mail appeal campaign, and other ways that we raise funds, especially around Christmas, very important, because it helps us to fill in the gaps of the programs that we receive grants for, as well as do other programs that we like to do.
So is this filling the majority of the gaps? When you take a look at what you received this year, how will this money be used? For people who drop money in every year, how is the money typically spent?
Well, any funds that come in through mail appeal, and from if people spontaneously come in and give us donations, or they send us donations through what we refer to as white mail. It wasn't in response to a campaign, but just a spontaneous mailing that people give us, or the Red Kettle campaign. That's all used locally. So it's raised by us and it's used by us, and that's the case for the Salvation Army all across the country. So any local Salvation Army unit, they raise the cash, or they raise the funds, and they use the funds locally. So that's also what makes those funds so important.
Tell me again, who the Salvation helps the most? Who are the people who are benefiting from these services the most?
Well, that's a loaded question, because again, like was said before by another guest, it depends on whether you're speaking macro or micro. In the case of Springfield, the way the Salvation Army works is we do a lot of things in a lot of places, but we don't do everything in every place. So we have the Friends of the Homeless in Springfield, so there really isn't a need for us to run a shelter, although there are many cities where we do run shelters, especially New York City. In the case of Springfield, we focus, our focus has been over the last years on youth work, either through the Bridging the Gap diversion program, crime diversion, teen crime, the literacy program, after school literacy. We have a summer literacy camp. We send kids to camp. We have times where kids come in and use, teens basically come in and use our facility, the gym and computer lab and things like that. Every Friday night, 30 to 40 teens come in. Safe plays, gang-free, things like that.
Yeah.
So it seems that our focus in the Springfield Corps, now keep in mind that we have Springfield, we have Holyoke. I also run, the Springfield Corps also operates the Westfield Service Center. You have a Salvation Army in Greenfield, you have a Salvation Army in Pittsfield and North Adams. And so each one sort of fits in the community. Like in the case of Greenfield, they have a feeding program. We don't do that here because it's already done. So, and like I said, in our case in Springfield, we're focusing on youth work primarily, and our food pantry and things like that.
Now, do you find that the need has gone up for you as well? You know, we were just talking about how more families are needing the food bank of Western Massachusetts, for example. He was talking about that. Where does your need stand right now? Well,
I could give you an example. Take the Toy for Joy program, which is a partnership with the Republican newspaper as well as Hasbro. We went from 3,000 to approximately 3,500 applications this year for toys. So,
wow.
So that increased, and that was the case because that program also covers Holyoke and Westfield and Greenfield. And the case in all four places was that it was up
wow.
this year. What happens after Christmas, we're so busy at Christmas time. Not only are we raising funds, but we're also, it's our biggest time for distribution.
Right.
And so not everything has been collated perfectly yet.
Yeah.
So in other words, the dust hasn't settled, but our impression is that everything was up, that requests were up, applications were up, and the amount of toys and services delivered are up.
So what are your goals for the new year? You know, as you embark on the new year and you take these Christmas donations, what are your plans for 2015? Serve more teenagers, as you were talking about. Are you looking to expand in any you know, parts of the Salvation Army? What are your goals for the new year?
Just like any agency, we want to, not only do we want to expand, but we want to do what we're already doing better.
Right.
And so we're having success in Bridging the Gap program and in diversion program, and we work very closely with the district attorney's office, and we want to expand that into Westfield as part of our focus, and to do better at it as we go along in Springfield and Holyoke. And as far as our youth programming in Springfield, and I know Lieutenant Garces in Holyoke also wants to begin to expand programming to the teens, and it seems to be a need. There seems to be a need, especially safe and sort of gang-free places to sort of gather and have a good time. And so it's a matter of raising options and things for the teens to do. And so we're looking to sort of focus on that and expand and do a little better. Not that we think we're doing poorly, but we always think that we could do better.
Now, how can people help out the Salvation Army throughout the year when we don't have the red kettles out there? What's the best way to donate?
Well, they can always send us a check. That's not a problem. And I get letters from people about all of the mail that they get in our mail appeal process. And if they respond to that, the mail appeal goes, the amount of pieces they get actually goes down. But if they respond to what they receive in the mail, if they respond online at our websites or send us checks or volunteer, they can call up to find out what volunteer opportunities are. They can call the Salvation Army in Springfield. And all throughout the state, whoever's listening to this or watching this show. There are opportunities all throughout Massachusetts.
Thanks, Captain, for coming on and talking to us. Nice to hear about all these expansion plans. Hopefully this is something that we'll see in motion, at least this time next year. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. Appreciate it. And it is not just a time of year to help others, it's also a time to better ourselves. Next, we'll talk about making New Year's resolutions and finding a way to achieve your goals. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about helping others and helping ourselves this holiday season. We just finished talking to some of the local nonprofits we donated to over the last year to find out how they're doing and what their plans are for the new year with our donations. Now let's talk about what you can do to better yourself. If you haven't already, many of you will be making New Year's resolutions. Today we'll talk about some of the most common resolutions and what you could do to actually keep them this year. Joining us to talk about this, we have Dawn Leaks, who is a professional life coach. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why are resolutions so difficult to keep?
Well, I think any goal can be difficult to keep depending on how you go about setting it.
Okay.
You know, so I've been encouraging people to set SMART goals. That's kind of a term that's been floating around, but it really works. You know, so SMART goals are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant or realistic, and they're time bound. And so, I mean, it's the beginning of the year, so it's a time where people feel like they're getting a new start, and that's great, but let's be realistic about how we're going about setting these goals and the resolutions.
Okay, so give me an example of a resolution that is bound to fail. You know, you were saying be specific, so how specific are we supposed to get?
Well, I'll use myself as a personal example, and I'll use weight because I think that a very popular goal is around working out, getting in shape, losing weight. And so for years, you know, and I've had a lot of weight to lose, but for years I would say, this year I'm going to lose 100 pounds. Right? And then, you know, I'd start going to the gym, I'd eat differently, and then by February I was off, and then the next year I'd go, this year I'm going to lose 100 pounds.
Right.
And so in 2012 I finally took a look at it and said, you know, that's an unrealistic goal. And it took years to gain this weight. Would it be okay if it took 4 or 5 years to take the weight off? And I said, you know what, that wouldn't be that bad. And so now what's a realistic goal for this year? So in 2012 I said, okay, this year I'm going to focus on my habits, you know, changing how I eat and moving more. But I didn't put a weight loss goal on it.
A number on it.
I didn't put a number on it because the weight is not just the problem. There's a lot of things that contribute to you gaining weight that you need to kind of change, as opposed to just focusing on the numbers. And that's what I did, and that's what I've been doing for the past couple of years, and I'm actually down about 4 dress sizes. You know?
Good for you.
Yeah, and so it's been different, and I set up little ways for me to have wins. You know, so people say, okay, January 1st comes, I'm gonna work out 3 times a week. But they haven't been working out for the past 6 or 7 months. And so they may start out and they may actually do 3 times this week, but next week they won't do 3 times. And so I kind of tell my clients, you know, why don't you set up a little mini goal within your larger goal that you can start with to give yourself a win. So say, okay, I'm going to work out once this week, And we know you can do that. And then you go work out once and you have a win, you have some confidence, and then, so maybe your goal is that by March, you're gonna be working out 3 times a week. You're gonna ease yourself into it. Another thing, I think we just live in this day and age where we can have it all. And we wanna have it all, and people don't like to think about sacrifice. But what are you gonna sacrifice in order to make your goals happen? Because if you're gonna go to gym 3 times a week, one thing that we definitely know for sure is that there's not gonna be any additional time in a day in 2015.
No, there's still 24 hours.
Yeah, still 24 hours. So where are you going to get the hour to go to the gym? And I don't think we think about that. So we have this goal, but we don't think about how we're going to make the goal happen. So am I going to give up sleep in the morning so that I can go to gym in the morning? Am I going to give up my favorite TV show? Am I going to DVR it and watch it maybe on Saturdays so that I can go to the gym? Am I going to pre-make my kids' meals so that I'm not spending that time cooking and I can go to the gym? Like, where are you going to get that time, and what are you going to give up in order to achieve your goal?
Wow, so when you say be specific, you mean you really need to write the plan down. It sounds like exactly how you're going to go about doing it so that this is a plan that can work.
Yeah.
Something else that you mentioned that struck me is you were saying that there are other contributing factors to losing weight, and I know that stress is something that a lot of people deal with. How do you appropriately manage stress? Because stress can take a toll on your health in many different ways. For those people who may want to learn how to manage their stress in the new year, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think stress management, that's a big topic, and I mean, I'm not an expert in that area, but what I will say is that, I mean, first, I think a big thing is to understand that you are stressed. I mean, I think a lot of people, we kind of live in this place where the more things you have on your plate, people see you as more successful. And so it's great to be busy, busy, busy. And so we're all trying to do so many more things than what we really truly have the capacity to do. And we don't realize we're stressed. We think we're keeping it together, and we think we're making it work. One of the things that I have encouraged people to do is to really kind of prioritize. If you have 10 activities, you're on 5 boards, and you have your kids and they have 10 activities, really take a look at the things you're spending your time doing and see if they are things that you really want to be doing. When I took some time to evaluate all the committees I was on and all the things that I was involved with, and really compared them against the things that I'm passionate about, there were things that I was just doing. I don't know why I was doing it. Maybe just because someone asked me. And so a sense of obligation, but they weren't the things that mattered the most to me. So I had to really sit down and figure out what are my priorities in terms of giving back to the community. I'm passionate about hunger issues, and I'm passionate about youth. So that's where my time should be spent. In really just evaluating the things you're spending your time with and learning how to say no. I think once you really get comfortable with saying no, and people get over it, you know what I mean?
Saying no can be hard.
It can be very hard, but I think once you get comfortable with that, it does start relieving a lot of stress for you.
That sounds like a winning plan. Just evaluate what you have happening. And how about quitting smoking or drinking less? How does somebody go about making some of these habit changing goals happen, in their life, some of these habits that you have?
Well, I think one of the things that we can do is we're kind of hard on ourselves. We're harder on ourselves usually than other people are. And I think we have really high expectations, so we want to quit cold turkey, and we want to do those type of things. And I think, I would approach that, and again, I'm not an expert in that specific area, but I would approach that the same way that you approach any goal, and try to ease into it. The expectation that, you've been smoking for 30 years or 40 years, that you would stop tomorrow and not smoke again, that's not realistic if we go back to SMART goals, And I think something that we can all do is seek help. I'm a coach. I mean, there are coaches, there's people that can help you through the, quitting smoking or some of those more serious goals that you have. And then there are plenty of life coaches out there that specialize in all sorts of different areas. And a coach's role is to stand with you and walk alongside you and encourage and support you, and then also hold you accountable. And I think a big piece sometimes why we're not doing what we set out to do is because we're not accountable.
And so maybe as you're setting these resolutions as well, share those resolutions with your husband or wife or a friend or somebody close to you so that they can hold you accountable. That might alone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would try to get someone who's not trying to work on the same goal you are. You know, so if you have a workout buddy and you don't feel like working out because it's snowing, and they're like, well, I don't feel like working out, you know. So try to have someone who's not actually working on the exact same thing you are as your accountability buddy.
Okay, Dawn Link's a professional life coach. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us and offering a great way to sort of set out and organize your plan as you head into the new year. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having
it.
me.
And next, we'll dig deeper into your financial resolutions. Many people are making resolutions about money. We'll talk about ways to save more money in the new year. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about helping others and helping yourself this holiday season. We were just talking to a life coach about setting realistic goals for yourself and coming up with a plan to achieve them. One resolution many people will make this new year is to get their financial situation under control and save more money. Here to talk about how to do that, we have John Zalicki, a Cambridge credit counselor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm sure that money is a big resolution many people have. Many people, I'm sure, have come up to you wondering how they can, you know, be successful in the new year with their money. So what's the first piece of advice for people who are looking to make a change this new year?
Basically, it's almost like a diet. A lot of New Year's resolutions are revolve around dieting, and instead of counting calories, you want to count your money. And a lot of people, we begin with tracking their spending. You know, for a month, just journalize and track basically every dollar you spend every day, and then weekly, monthly, go back and look at that and see what adjustments you can make, what was a necessary spend, what was unnecessary. And most people that we do that exercise with at Cambridge, almost all of them find something where they can eliminate or reduce that spending and then use that for, you know, savings or debt repayment. So it all start with just, you know, really bearing down and just keeping track of every cent that's going out of your wallet, whether it's writing it down on a little pad, using online programs, whatever it might be. But it definitely starts with that. And again, you're going to see everything from spending. We hear people say they spend $5 a day on a morning coffee.
Wow.
That's $100 a month, you know, or they go out to lunch every day and spend $10, you know, that's, you know, $50 a week, that's $200 a month. So those little things add up, and people need to realize that if they're going through a financial, you know, tough time, so to speak, that they really need to buckle down and stop overspending on non-necessity items.
Okay, so before you can really set a budget, you need to be honest with yourself and see how much you're spending.
Absolutely.
Okay, now how do you go about saving more money? You know, many people will say, between my bills and everything else, I just don't have enough money to spend, or money to save. How can you find money to save?
It's tough, but it goes back to the tracking of spending. That hopefully will open some doors to some savings opportunities for you. If you cut back that morning coffee of 5 a day, and you do it even every other day, or you cut it out completely. So when you identify the things that aren't necessities, you really need to be disciplined and really dedicate that money to go into savings. And once you go through your whole budget, I think most people say even up to 10% they can eliminate, you know, being more careful at the grocery store, you know, coupons, you know, going to just looking for sale items, just being all around more disciplined in your spending. That's the easiest way. Obviously, if you can generate a part-time job or, you know, other income sources that may be available to you. But if you're just talking about cutting spending, it really has to start and finish with you and your behavior and your patterns. And
how do you go about setting a realistic financial goal? People will go in and say, you know, I want to save this much money, or as Dawn was saying, they'll say I want to lose 100 pounds or 200 pounds. How do you know what is realistic for your financial situation and something that you can actually meet?
Right, we got to start small. If you're not saving anything, to say you're going to save $1,000 a month, obviously, is probably not realistic. Once you do the journalizing and the budgeting, and you can kind of see where you're at and say, okay, you know, I've freed up, you know, $100, you know, let me try to save at least half of that to start. Because if you're not a saver right away, it's hard to just become a disciplined saver immediately. So start small. You know, even if you can save, some people say $1 a day to start, at the end of the month, that's $30. You know, you double it in month 2 to $2 a day, save $60. So there's no like real number, but again, if you can save $1 a day for a year, that's $500 roughly, $400 to $500. So again, not a ton of money, but that $400 or $500 will probably cover most unexpected expenses that you may have. So again, it's all about starting slow, starting small, being patient, and just again, not wasting money, not overspending, and over time, just like when you save for retirement, it takes time. It's going to take time to build that savings account, but it's better than having nothing. Having $200 is better than zero for some people. So
sure,
just be patient and be disciplined. Stick to your goals. Don't make unrealistic goals. That way, if you don't make them, you'll be frustrated. So start small and work to succeed, and things should fall into place from that.
And what is the ultimate goal? How much should you have in your savings account? Is it 3 billing cycles? I've heard different projections on this or different opinions. What do you think? How much do you need to have in your savings account?
It varies from expert to expert. Most say 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses and savings. And my day-to-day job, when I tell people that, they're no way, they can't do that. So, start again small, but your goal should be at least 3 months worth of living expenses, and that will cover if you're out of work or unemployed, whatever may happen. You should be safe for at least 90 days. The goal would be 6 months, but again, to a lot of people that's unrealistic, especially if they're living paycheck to paycheck right now. But yeah, I would say 3 to 6 months would be your target.
Okay, a lot of people starting the new year with credit card debt. How do you go about managing your credit card debt? If you're just in over your head right now, where do you start with that?
There's different techniques and strategies that you can have. You can always contact the credit card companies and try to work out a plan, repayment plan. You can do it yourself. It's going to be harder. Calling the credit card company, you may get a rate reduction, or you may get a concession of some degree, which will help. Maybe a one, even if it's a short-term plan, that could help you 6 months, 1 year. If you're going to do it yourself, or the credit card companies aren't willing to work with you, you usually want to focus on, the rule of thumb is your highest interest first. Some say you should focus on your smallest debt first and kind of work from the small ones up, more for psychological gain. But if you really want to save money, it's about paying your highest interest debt first, because you're paying that much in finance charges every month.
Sure.
So you'd want to focus on the high interest debt and pay the minimums on the others, focus on the one that's charging you the highest interest finance charges, and then work your way down. There is credit counseling, obviously, where we have relationships with the credit card companies where we can get the rates lowered, some as low as 0%. So credit counseling is an option if people feel that they're just not getting anywhere with their credit card companies or themselves. Credit counseling is certainly an option for people. And but usually we tell people that, call the credit card company first and see if they're willing to work with you. And if they're not, then we're there to work with them on their behalf.
Okay, and I know that some credit cards will offer like a 0% APR to transfer some of your balances over. Does that help you? Is that a mind game? Do you end up transferring so much over? Is that a good thing for people to do and take advantage of?
It can be if you use it right. If you get a 0% 6-month offer and you can pay it off in 6 months and not pay any interest, then it's great. The reason these credit card companies are so willing to do it is because most people can't do that. So then that 6 months or that 1 year ends, and then the interest starts again, and now they have your business. So a lot of people play that balance transfer game for years, and it's just, again, if you use it right, it can be great because you'll pay no interest. But the people who do it constantly because they can't pay it off, now X bank has your debt instead of A bank before, and a lot of times you'll pay a balance transfer fee, which can be hundreds of dollars. It's a percentage of what you transfer. So.
And does that hurt your credit at all to move your money from one to another?
Opening new lines of credit and closing lines of credit does have a minimal effect on your score. And people who look at your credit, if you're going to buy a house and they see that you're juggling credit cards, that means you're overextended. So the credit score effect is minimal, but if somebody really sits down with you and looks at your credit report, if you're juggling credit cards and doing balance transfers and not paying them in that time frame, that means you are an overextended consumer, which raises up other flags to lenders who may be wanting to work with you. So.
It can be a complicated issue, paying down your debt and saving money. John Zielicki, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us, a Cambridge credit counselor. I'm sure a lot of people will be knocking on your door this new year to try to get their money under the control. Thank you for coming on and talking to us and offering some advice. And we'll have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. And that is our program for today. We want to thank our guests for joining us. Thanks to you at home for watching. If you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at WWLP.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday. Take care.